it's Drybear. Continuing a series of covering every single weapon in the First Descendant, and today we're going to be talking about the AoE mobbing weapon that is Kingsguard Lance. Here is the one-sheet build sheet for the Kingsguard Lance, and as a mobbing weapon, it is by far the worst mobbing weapon in the game. Unfortunately, it shares the same fate as all of the other beam rifles in the current state of the game in that they are thematically very cool, they are designed very well, their hard surface models for the weapons look gorgeous and stunning, but they just are severely underperforming compared to every other weapon in the game. They were pretty good in the beta, but I feel like they just over-nerfed them, or they were afraid of what beam rifles could do, and they just kept them down. They're just being held down by the man, by the Nexon man, the Nex man, the Nem man, I don't know. But we've got, this is the build that I recommend for running it. Your mobbing DPS is going to be about 570,000 right now. Now, as far as I can tell right now, we can't do weak point through mobbing because we have to shoot our lance, shoot our deployable, and that removes all weak point opportunity. If we could do weak point, this would jump up to about 650 DPS, KDPS or so, which is still not great, but better than what it is right here. As a reference right now, you can get Thunder Cage up to 900 to 950k AoE mobbing DPS. You can get, with Freyna, you can do Fallen Hope around the same, and Greg's is pushing, 1.1 million mobbing DPS fully maxed out. Kingsguard Lance is about just under half. It's like 40% of a Greg's right now as an AoE. So unfortunately, let's talk about the weapon. Let's talk about its strengths, and maybe when it gets a buff, when it gets reworked or something changes with it, we might be able to see this weapon come into the front, which would be really cool. I would love to see this weapon. It's super cool. It has this like bright pink laser beam that comes along with it. It's got some cool little attachments in the back. It's such a cool looking weapon, and just like the other beam rifles, it animates and moves separately. It has less crit chance and crit damage than Clairvoyance, though it is meant to be an AoE weapon. It fires a little bit faster overall, and actually has a better damage profile than the Clairvoyance does in general. So Clairvoyance has a, on stage 1, it goes up to 15% bonus damage, and then stage 2 is 45%. Which most beam rifles are like 10%, 20%, around that range. Clairvoyance so far has been the highest, except for Kingsguard takes the cake in that it goes from stage 1 up to stage 2 is 30% bonus damage. Stage 2 to stage 3 from stage 1, it's 80% bonus damage. It is a massive increase in damage done. Look at this bright pink beam. It looks so cool. Like the VFX are so clean. So let's talk about the weapon and how it functions in general and how you might go about using it. So this one has a special unique ability, as all ultimates do. When you hold down ADS or aim down sight, it gives you the opportunity to place down a deployable. This deployable serves as a pylon or a beacon that allows you to reflect AoE damage from the pylon. When you left click, you'll place it down. It has a duration, and then when the duration is up, it will end. However, you can shoot it with this weapon and this weapon only. I tried as many combinations as I can think of. People have messed around with this to maybe switch to a different weapon. You can't. It has to be the Kingsguard Lance to activate it. So once you put this down, you can shoot it, and then it'll do AoE damage. It'll increase its range and increase its duration. So the longer you shoot it, the bigger the radius gets, the more damage it does. And when this weapon is fully maxed out, you have a pretty respectable radius on it. So you can actually put it down and do AoE damage towards every target in the area while you shoot it. However, there's a bunch of major downsides with this kind of function that really make it kind of at a disadvantage relative to other mobbing weapons. Firstly, you can't pierce with this weapon. So I can't shoot the pylon through a target, which means that the only way for me to do my AoE damage is to shoot the pylon directly, which means I am now losing my single target damage in order to do AoE damage. Thunder Cage doesn't have this problem. Fallen Hope doesn't have this problem. Greg's doesn't have this problem. It is unique to Kingsguard Lance that you have to lose your single target damage in order to do AoE, and it is dependent on you being able to do that. The second major problem with this relative to other mobbing weapons that do scale with weak point is that you can't do weak point to this pylon. So when you put it down, I have not been able to find a single part of this mesh that counts as weak point in order to do weak point damage, which means not only can you not do single target damage to enemies, you also cannot do your AoE, you can't even do weak point to this deployable either in order to increase the damage in AoE. You're just kind of losing out in so many different aspects. Now, like I said, when the unique ability is maxed out, this goes up to 10% damage per tick, which means that you get, for each beam that comes off, it's doing 10% of the weapon's damage, which means if you wanted to match your single target damage on the weapon, you would need to have 10 targets in the AoE, splitting up that beam to all the targets in order to do equal damage to what you would normally be doing with just shooting the weapon at a target. So I think it's just severely undertuned. They could very easily raise up a whole bunch of numbers on this weapon and it would be perfectly fine. It also, like, you know, just the fact that you can't weak point on it and that you lose your single target damage means that they could crank the passive on this thing to the moon and it would be fine, because a lot of the other mobbing weapons, Thunder Cage, Fallen Hope, and Greg's Reversed Fate, can still do single target damage while they're doing their mobbing, right? They can still gain their main DPS while doing the mobbing, and on Thunder Cage, Fallen Hope, and Greg's, they can shoot the weak point and that will apply to their AoE damage, which is super nice. So what they could do with this weapon, just brainstorming some basic ideas, obviously they could just raise the passive up, right? This doesn't need to be 10% per tick realistically, right? Most of the other mobbing weapons gain more than their single target damage at 2 AoE targets. Launchers, Fallen Hope, Thunder Cage, and Greg's Reverse Fate do more damage than just shooting a single target, as long as their AoE is hitting at least 2 targets, which means that if you wanted to match that with this weapon, you would need to match the 100% plus that, and you can put this passive at like 60% damage per beam, and it would still not be as good as Greg's Reverse Fate at the current state. So 6% to 10% is just so tiny. But I feel like a use case for this weapon, which would be really cool, is if the weapon beam actually pierced through the target. Right, if I could put the pylon down and then I could shoot single target and line it up and still trigger the beam behind it while dealing damage to a target, it's more of a positional, gameplay oriented change. I feel like that would be really cool and it would add to the theme of it. Another major problem with this weapon is that it has a limited ammo pool, which is kind of odd. So the way this weapon works is that when you put the pylon down, it costs some of your ammo to do it. At base, it's 6 ammo. So putting it down once will take 6 ammo out of your magazine. You no longer have that ammo anymore. It's gone, and you actually have to reload to get it back. So as soon as you put it down, that costs you 6 ammo worth of damage, which is not nothing. You can take any weapon in the game, take 6 rounds of that weapon, and calculate how much damage it would have done if you had shot those 6 rounds, and you compare it to this pylon by itself, which is not doing anything upon spawning. They could even make it so like when you put it down, it explodes and does bonus damage in an area. They can make the radius bigger. Like if it did damage when you placed it and then you could pierce with it, I feel like the weapon would be super cool, super fluid, very fun to play with, very strategic. And I also think that because you have to channel on the pylon, having a lower round count than weapons like clairvoyance and stuff just feels weird to me. It's almost like it should have closer to like a machine gun round count. Like the fact that I'm spending rounds to cause this AoE to appear, and then I'm spending rounds again to do a small amount of AoE, just feels like a strange double dipping experience. On top of that, when you max this out, you don't even get to 0 rounds. This goes to -2. Minus max rounds, so even when the weapon's fully upgraded, you still have -2 max rounds. On top of that, so the ammo cost can go down, the rounds per magazine debuff can go down, but even then it's still not going to go down to 0, so you still have that piece there. On top of that, it is a ramp weapon as well. Greg's doesn't have ramping, Thunder Cage doesn't have ramping, Fallen Hope has a little bit of ramping because you're trying to apply the poison debuff and then spread the poison and do things like that, but it's nowhere near to this level. So the beam rifle, because it's the beam rifle, it does scale up the AoE damage based on the charge state of the beam rifle. So being able to play with that does give you more AoE damage, but you're kind of waiting until you hit that stage 3 to increase your DPS even more, which is, you know, it should, you would think, anytime there's a time investment required to make a mechanic be better, usually you would see the top end of that be much higher because it's not going to be able to maintain that high state all the time, right? I think that the numbers on this weapon are just criminally low for what it should be doing, and you could balance this in so many different ways, but I hope they also do some gameplay changes. Like maybe if you shoot the reticle on top of it perfectly, it gives you weak point. So you can spread weak point around to all the targets around. Maybe if you shot like one of these specific spots on it, it would be really nice. Or maybe you could keep the pylon active indefinitely without a maximum duration, right? Like right now, you can get this max duration up to 8 seconds, which means that if you channeled on it the entire time, you can get it up to 8 seconds, but it's still gonna disappear after 8 seconds. I feel like as long as you're shooting it, it should probably be active the entire time, unless there's like some garbage collection problems with doing that. But the fact that I have to keep placing it and there's no benefit, like it's only a negative to me to place it, right? If there's no like when it spawn, like there's no spawn effect, I don't get damage, I don't get CC, I don't get charge rate. All I'm doing is I'm spending my own ammo to spawn this thing. There's no on spawn effect, and it times out no matter what I do, and I have to spawn another one, which costs me more ammo. It just feels really like it's just a major bummer, you know? Like I feel like it's so cool, but it's so weak at the same time that makes it not worth using in a lot of situations. Like you're just better off using any other mob weapon in the game. So that is my rant on the King's Guard Lance. I'm not even gonna make a bossing build for this weapon because I don't think you should use it for bossing. Also, since you can't weak point the pylon for mobbing, we don't run really any weak point. We're not gonna run real life fighter. I don't even have it weighted on this list. So sharp precision shot's gonna be your best bet here. And then you just try to increase rounds, reload, superconductivity, weapon tuning are very good pickups here. Expand weapon charge and recycling genius, because recycling genius and reload insight are actually super crucial here, as you saw, because if your pylon hasn't been maxed out yet, you actually get to a point where it will disappear before you can use it. So you want to get it to max radius and keep it there. But if your reload is too long, you'll actually end up having it disappear before you can shoot it again. So having those reload mods makes a massive difference, and having the max round count makes a massive difference because you can then put these out with a little bit more care and a little bit less worry. And you can also keep them out for longer and maximize the value and radius on them for longer as well, which I think makes the weapon a lot better. But this is the build that I would run with. The stat ratings are on the left side. The reroll ratings are on the top. You can see how crit damage and rounds on reroll are pretty close together. You could probably swap them out. Like your best roll would be bonus versus Colossi, or like you can even do bonus versus the 3 different factions and then firearm attack. And that would still be fine because then you would get firearm attack and bonus versus any of the factions for mobbing. You would still get a big VLC from the devs, and hopefully that ends up happening. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.